when the world's too dark of a place to be, and you need an escape from reality. Open up those pages and start your fantasy, whatever genre you please. And join a book club, 'cause you won't read it on your own. Join a book club, so you'll be held accountable. It's just a means to an end, but you're doing it with your friends. So join the book club by DLC.
Woo! It's dancing time, ladies and gentlemen. It's book club time. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for dancing along. It's time to get back into Memories of Ice. I'm Jeff Kanata. I'm here with Lana Bashinsky. Good morning, Lana.
Good morning, Jeff. I am here at the birthplace of our theme song, my sister's house. So for our second new background in 2 weeks, but hopefully should be settling into my new place next week.
The grand tour continues.
Yes, definitely. I'm on the North American tour right now. Europe, maybe someday.
Oh, that's very exciting. Very exciting. Get your tickets now, ladies and gentlemen. We have so much to dig into. Last week, we told you that we were going to be doing 3 chapters this week. Well, little swerve. Our friend, our buddy, our Sherpa through these chapters, Sorov in the Discord, in the comments, has been so kind as to help us figure out the best plan forward. And his advice has gone a long way to making things more manageable for us in the past. So we're going to take it again, because after we said we were doing 3 chapters last week, Sorov, who I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, came in and said, you know what, guys? 2 chapters this week, 2 chapters next week, and then you can get back on the 3-chapter train. And having read these 2 chapters, I think that was good advice. There's a lot to get into, a lot of dense stuff, a lot of really cool lore, chunky stuff to get into with chapters. What are we on? 3 and 4. 3 and 4, mm-hmm. Right?
Yes, it is 3 and 4.
Yes, chapters 3 and 4 of book 1, The Spark and the Ashes, of novel 3, Memories of Ice, of the Malazan Books of the Fallen. Yeah. But we like to start the show each week. Is there something going to fall on you?
I'm so sorry. There's a giant mosquito. I really don't want it to bite me. I'm like so sorry.
That's fine. It's fine. At least it's not a corpse bug or whatever those were called from Skates.
Yeah, sorry.
The thing we like to do at the beginning of each episode, even if you're not reading along with us, we hope you are, but if you're not reading along with us, we want to give you something that still you can hang out and talk about books with us. So we'll do a non-spoiler section before we get into the novel. And this week, Lana, I wanted to talk to you about audiobooks, because I don't think we've really discussed audiobooks before, but I really enjoy audiobooks, and I want to have kind of a general discussion about where you place them in your mind, how you choose to experience a novel via reading it versus audiobooking it. Like, is there criteria that you apply to that decision, and what makes for a good audiobook? Because I have just completed an audiobook that I'm going to talk about at the end of the show, and I also am recording an audiobook. This is the second audiobook that I'm recording. I recorded a book called Traveling in Space I mentioned before in a previous episode, and I'm doing a new one now. I'm about 3/4 of the way through it. And I want to know what you think makes a good audiobook as well. What do you look for in an audiobook?
That is a great question. My relationship with audiobooks is like a distinct change over time. And I think the real pivotal moment in being like, I must accept audiobooks into my life is when I learned how to drive and was living in LA. And suddenly I have at least an hour and 15 minutes every day in the car, just sitting there. And I love music. I listen to a lot of music as well. But the joy of being like in a car, in a space where you're traveling around, more pleasant and like a train going through the countryside, and just being able to listen to something while you look at beautiful scenery or the back of another car, really makes the experience that much better. And so I really started embracing audiobooks when I needed to be sitting and not doing anything else for a long time for a while.
Will you put on an audiobook if you only have like a 20-minute drive? Or do you reserve it for when you're in the car for over an hour or something, like longer drives?
I reserve it for longer drives. I definitely like my auditory spoken word. All of it sort of came together at the same time. I like started my new job at Riot. I started listening to podcasts because of DLC. So I would listen to you a lot in the car with a lot of the AAS Game Maker's Notebook and Designer Notes, like a lot of video game podcasts. And then the longest drive I started was like from California to Seattle. And then it was like, oh, that's a long drive. That's like hours and hours and hours. So let's really get the book going. But the book that I chose for the first audiobook I listened to, not the greatest audiobook experience, but I had my husband in the car, so we could at least pause it and be like, "Oh my god, this is so annoying." But I used to be.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I used to be so against audiobooks. I felt like it broke the personal understanding of like what I wanted to build when I read the book. Sort of in the same way that coming into reading the Malazan books, I'm like, I'm going to try and do it. I'm not going to personally read the guide. Like we can talk about it here, but I want to just see what I can get from it.
Right.
And I felt like even audiobooks sort of were like giving me too much in a way, and like made me read things differently than I would have if I was just reading them myself.
That's really interesting. I've actually heard Mr. Erikson talk about that with AP Canavan on the Critical Dragon YouTube channel. And I thought that was interesting. One of the topics I was hoping to get into with him when he was on our show, and maybe next time, hopefully we speak to him again, we'll be able to bring it up. But they spoke about how there is a layer, which is undeniable, a layer when you listen to an audio book of performance that is coloring your experience. And I think you're speaking directly to that, is that you are the pure reading experience is a one-to-one relationship with the author. You are interpreting the words as you will. And it's the author's job to craft that interpretation. And you have that once removed with the audiobook reader who is delivering their own interpretations of the words, their own crafted performance, their rhythm, their cadence with how they speak the words, not even pronunciation. That's a whole other issue, but just the cadence of how the thought is conveyed, So I'm curious. I love that what you said about certain books wanting that pure experience with, your cadence, your rhythm, however you interpret the words. But I'm wondering how you decide, like, is it like, well, this is a less than experience, so I don't really care as much about this book, so I'm going to listen to it audio, or how do you make that determination?
Well, I think it comes down to sort of knowing in advance that I'm going to pick it up as an audiobook. It sort of changes the way that I have to like mentally switch myself to like mentally prepare to say, I'm actively seeking the different experience.
Yeah.
And I think that has been the big change, which before audiobooks were so not a part of my life that I didn't have something to switch to. I was just like, ooh, this is weird. I don't like it. I don't like that it's giving me all this stuff.
Right.
And so I think starting with a book that, like on the long drive with Jeff and I, a book just came out that both of us really wanted to read and had previously sort of separately read and then discussed the rest of the books in this series together. So when the fourth book in the series dropped and we were like, yeah, let's go listen to it in the car together.
Right.
And we can experience it like literally together. It was inviting this new experience. It wasn't just about me and my experience. Like sharing that with somebody, I think helped open the door to being open to it. But the book, Jeff Kanata, which we've talked about lots, was the fourth book in the Stormlight Archive. Yeah.
Brandon Sanderson's very highly regarded Stormlight Archive.
It's just like realizing how like there's a few realizations that I came into. So what like helped me realize what I wanted from an audiobook and did not feel like I got from an audiobook is having a book that's a little more concise,
Yeah.
having and realizing how much Brandon Sanderson novels, like, I can read quite quickly those books. And so there are pages where I really am like, I understand exactly what's going on. Oh, I literally see the pattern of the sentences he just wrote on the last page over again. Like, I filter a lot of that out when I'm reading, so I can read it quite quickly. But listening to somebody read it in slow motion, I was like, I can't stand it. It was like driving us insane listening to it. And liked the overall story, but some of like the slower, more like scientific world building parts were just too much.
Do you ever
Yeah.
listen at faster than normal speed? I know a lot of people do that with audiobooks. They put it on like 1.5 or 2.0 speed.
Jeff is very into that. I like, again, if now that I have the experience, I'm like, well, I'm going to experience it as intended.
Right.
I think that book we did later, or actually we used it, and I realized that it helped me fall asleep because it was such a long audiobook that we would bring it back. And now we listen to an audiobook before bed every night.
Yeah.
And that was one that literally was like, it took us months to get through because I'd listen to like a sentence and I'd be like, oh my God, and I'd pass out.
Is there something that you like in an audiobook narrator? I mean, is speed a factor? Do you want them to kind of, speak, as Hamlet would say, trippingly on the tongue? Do you or is clarity more? Because I feel like as an audio narrator myself, I haven't done tons of books, but I strive for clarity and not speed. Although sometimes if there's an action sequence or something exciting, I'll try to pick it up as to convey that sense of urgency. But is there? Because I think clarity of from word to word, so you really can hear it, so you're not missing anything, is something that I value with an audio narrator. But it sounds like speed is important to you.
No, I think clarity is more important to me. I think that book in particular is sort of, even compared to the other books in the series, has like many more tedious parts to it. The other books I think had a lot more action, a lot juicier. This one went deep into like the science of how the storm magic works,
right,
for like many pages, and that was too much. It also had like these Brandon Sanderson, I find, does not do like sexy flirty stuff very well. Not that that's like my number one thing in a book, but if it's there, like, make it good. But it's like slow motion, mediocre, childish flirting between Shalon and Adolin that I'm like, read in slow motion by a mature woman being like, well, Adolin, Shalon said. And I'm like, oh my God, it's anything is better than this. But
are you looking for flirting between a grown man and a 10-year-old girl? Because that's what we got this week.
Just kidding. Oh my, wow. That's where you went with that? Sorry. Are you flirting with me? So something I found when I found a book that I liked, the next audiobook I listened to was the Sabriel that's read by Tim Curry.
Oh, right.
And it is not faster, but he does like soft differences in the voices that all the characters are really distinct without being too loud or too overacted. The writing, obviously, it's young adult, so it's simpler. So the whole book is a little bit more concise, which I think makes it really palatable as an experience overall. And it's like an exciting, interesting, magical world. And that was, I think, what I look for. Like, and the book isn't written so like exactly, Sabriel said, Mogget said, blah blah blah. It has like line over line, just dialogue back and forth that you can tell when you're reading, but that he has such a soft differentiation between one line and the next that you know exactly who's talking at all times, even with like 4 characters. And so it's cool. Just he really brings you into it in such a way that I really felt like, a little kid sitting on the floor of my elementary school, and the teacher's got the book open and is reading the voices and reading the book to you. That was like, oh, this is what's beautiful about this experience.
That's awesome.
So, Yeah.
Well, this is a pretty big topic. I think we could probably do part 2 of this topic next
I
week.
know. Yeah.
But I'll just say quickly that along those lines, I think my top audiobook experience, I think the greatest audiobook narrator I've ever encountered is Jim Dale, who did all of the Harry Potter books, which, this may be blasphemous to some who are listening, but I don't think the Harry Potter books are very well written. But in the early 2000s when they were coming out, I was consuming them primarily through audiobook because Jim Dale added so much. He did voices for all the characters, and in fact, I think this predates the films, and I think a lot of the film actors actually kind of used his vocal interpretation of those characters as a basis for their performance. That's how iconic his interpretations were, and certainly he added a layer onto them. But I thought it was an improvement, and so as I was experiencing those with the rest of the universe and that cultural moment as they were being released, I preferred the audiobook experience because of Jim Dale and how great he was at it. But I think there's a lot more to dig into there. So maybe we'll do this part 2 topic. And hopefully folks in the Discord or on the comments here on the YouTube page will, lend their own opinions. We can weave some of those in next week as we continue this non-spoiler topic. But I think we should probably move on now because there's a lot to dig into on just 2 chapters of Memories of Ice. So let's do it. Spoilers starting now for chapters 3 and 4 of Memories of Ice. And we start, Lana, we start with a new character, or newish, newly defined character, who I'm calling the Maybe. I don't know how you.
The Maybe too.
It's very Arrested Development, maybe.
Yeah.
But
I'm so glad that you said the name first. I was like, yeah, who is it, Jeff? Tell us how you say that.
I'm sure it's not pronounced that way officially, but I'm going to call it the Maybe just because I love that character from Arrested Development. And I think this is a fascinating character and a fascinating, contextualizing her and how she's this young Rivy woman who appears to be an old woman because literally the child that she birthed has been sucking her life force, been just draining her own life force to grow at an accelerated rate. And we find out that this girl, that this 10-year-old appearing girl, is known as Silver Fox. Cool. And we find out very quickly that she's 2 souls. She is a bone caster. She's a soul taken. She slices. She dices. She's got so many applications. She feels like uber powerful, a little scary to a lot of people. But most importantly, she's Tattersail and Night Chill. Tattersail and Night Chill, and maybe a third party. Maybe there's a third party in there. Maybe Bellerdan, I think is how you pronounce it. But she is a flesh and blood bone caster. Super important. Those haven't existed for thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years. And a soul taken, although I don't think we know what her soul taken form is. I'm guessing a fox, Silver Fox.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about, actually, because there's something about this this chapter. I wish I went back and found the line where it said something about her being soul taken, but then later it says something about Talanimas being soul taken in general. And I was like, is that them turning into the grains of sand?
Oh, interesting. My understanding is soul taken only changes form into another creature.
Not Givers. Yeah. You're right. So I was like, I couldn't there's something that made me think that it said that a lot of Talanimas were soul taken, and or all of them or something like that. And I don't know if I caught that correctly, but I did not catch that.
I think that the Talanimas obviously are the undead uber race that we have seen that Tool is a part of, and they were once not immortal, but they did that ritual that turned them immortal and let them sort of move through. And that's one of the reasons they could hunt the Jagged, because the Jagged established all of the barriers of ice, and they couldn't move through them in their mortal forms, but when they turned immortal, they could see through the ground and not worry about the barriers of ice.
Yeah. Okay.
Super useful to just be undead forever. Super useful.
Yeah. And also just the idea of being like, man, that journey is treacherous. We could just not try and kill them. or we could become immortal.
We could kill ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. I loved all this stuff with Maybe and her inner monologue about how she's struggling. She doesn't want Silver Fox to know that it's this beautiful expression of motherhood and parenthood, of how you sort of give of yourself. Lord knows. I mean, look at this gray. I didn't have it before kids.
Speaking of Silver Fox.
Oh my. Yes, my children, as they've just started school this week, just draining my very soul, aging me prematurely. I relate a lot to Maybe. I'll just put it that way. So yeah, but I thought it's a beautiful expression of that, how she sort of willingly gives of herself and doesn't even want the child to know how taxing and ultimately destructive it is on her life to just, be a mother, be the mother of this child.
Did we get an understanding of, if I recall from the book 1, when we see Crep talking with Cruel and friends in
the dream sequence. Yeah.
They were like, well, Tattersail, we can fix her. Look over here. There's a vessel that we can put her in. I assumed when I read that at the time that was like a baby that was just born, or a baby that was stillborn, that they could infuse back to life with Tattersail's soul. Was it clear on? But now I feel like they were just like, look, Maybe's an empty vessel.
It
just
feels like an
immaculate
conception in this context. You're right. I do remember having that impression that it was being put into a stillborn child. But yeah, now the impression I have is that she is this, the Maybe is the word that means this disposable. It's basically like a disposable container. It's like what you get with Chinese takeout, It's like it's actually, I thought it was very beautiful, but in such a disrespectful way. Like it's the way she's referred. That's the only way they refer to her, as this piece of garbage, really. Like this thing that is, you just destroy after one use. Yeah. It's so disrespectful, but like the way she embraces that is kind of beautiful.
I agree.
But this whole sequence, to me, this entire chapter, the introduction of the parlay itself, all of it, I just found riveting. I just thought it reminds me of the scene in Deadhouse Gates when Duker walked in and they first had the sort of like tete-a-tete with everybody in the room. Erikson does it so well. Like, it's just people in a room hashing it out, but it's so juicy and so interesting, and you're just like involved in all the tiny little relationships that everybody has with each other, and they're all so good.
And very similarly to the sort of introduction of Duker and friends from the last book, we have like the moment where they all kind of get together, like on the hilltop, before they actually go to the true parlay.
Yeah, so it's the readying for the thing and then the thing. Yeah.
Yes. So they're all kind of there like sussing each other out, and Silver Fox is there, is like whispering like way too mature stuff for how old she is, and they're all like, all right, keep it down. All right.
It's
just look at them.
It's so funny. The all of the Silver Fox stuff where she senses and knows things she shouldn't know, and it's creeping everybody out, and everybody's like, stop saying that stuff. You're literally going to be dangerous to everyone
that guy
here.
Wants to kill you so bad.
It's like being being on a date with a friend that you've confided, or meeting a person that you're into with a friend that you've confided that you're super into them with, and they just can't. They keep blowing up your spot, and you're just like, stop! You are ruining this.
It needs to be organic.
Yeah.
I had the funniest, I don't think I've ever really thought this before while reading a book. I had a very funny reaction. I sort of instantly like Silver Fox so much as a character that when she starts going on her spiel about how she needs everybody's support, things are gonna be really hard, and like she knows the future, and also she's the leader of the Talana Mouse, etc. Blah 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 blah. As she's going through that, I'm like, this is so cool. Man, they really have to get like they'd have to get like, such a good child actor for this to be good. If it were ever a film, you better pick somebody great. I was like imagining the future being like, don't miscast this, whoever gets this later.
Yeah. Well, so the interesting cast of characters there. We got
Yes.
fan faves, our faves, Dude Jack One Arm, Whiskey Jack, yeah, bros, yes. But
And
we've got
another buddy.
Artanthos,
Yes.
who I think is somebody else. Did you get a? I feel like Artanthos is somebody we already know, and
I agree.
because they keep saying like, oh, this isn't the name that person has gone by before, and certain things will happen. Silver Fox will say a thing, and they'll flinch, and maybe we'll notice the flinching. And it's like, there's something going on with that person.
Well, when they describe, at first I thought it was Erikson doing that thing where because it was sort of through Silver Fox's view as she's sort of sussing everybody out. And she's like, there's something about that guy.
Yeah.
What is it? And at first I was like, is that Gnew's Paran?
Oh, yeah, but clearly
so
not.
that she's like, is there something about him? Ooh, he's so mysterious. But then that wasn't the case. And so I'm like, what was that about? So I didn't actually think, oh, maybe that's somebody we already know that is being, I just assumed that, I mean, he's a significant character, but I don't know how yet.
I think it's somebody we know. I think it's going to be revealed that's a name that we haven't heard before, but a character we have seen before. I could be wrong about that, but I'm getting some like
maybe
somebody in disguise, not disguise, but like laying low and not revealing who they are person.
Or the other thing I think it could be is like all the sort of poems or these things at the beginning of chapters. Somebody who wrote one of those.
Oh, interesting. Perhaps we could go back and look.
Yeah.
We also have a black Moranth, which those are such a cool species in these bug people, and they never talk. It's called Twist because the fingers are all messed up. Probably going to find out what that's all about. But interesting character there. But the most, well, then Caladan Brood, pretty big character that literally we've heard so much about, haven't seen, and now all of a sudden get to see. Pretty rad, giant. Barghast blood, like looking cool. But I think the most interesting character to be there for me is Calor. Because here we are last week, we're like, oh, crazy scene with Calor, just, literally defying elder gods and the gods cursing him and he cursing them back. And there's like, and, some of the folks in our comments were like, you've met Calor before, you just don't remember it. And to see Calor just there, because I'm thinking, oh, Calor is going to be like our big bad. Maybe even Calor and the crippled god are maybe the same person. I don't know.
Yeah,
but no, Calor's just hanging out with Caladan Brood.
But that was like, I've had the exact same reaction where I was like, oh, Caladan Brood and Calor, and I was like, oh, that sounds almost like that other name of that guy. And I'm like, wait a second. And then I feel like we talked, or at least I feel like I talked myself so much into being like, oh, that freaky pestilence creepo in the Warren, that's Calor, right? And then it's like, no, that's not at all.
But this is what I love about these books. They constantly defy expectations and subvert expectations. And this notion that Calor has this crazy backstory is very powerful. And now is sort of in our gang of people we like, and it's just so interesting. And I think it's the same thing. It's very similar to me with Taishren, where I felt like, oh, Taishren, betrayed, very
boy.
Bad wizard. One thing we know is that Taishren's bad. It's like, well, yeah, probably not. It's more complicated than that. And that's what's so cool about these novels is that nothing is black and white. Everything is shades of gray, and there's weird alliances, and you never are quite sure how you want to judge people, which I think is so cool. It's so interesting. But it's awesome that Calor is there. clearly still not a nice dude, immediately wants to kill Silver Fox.
Yeah.
But also it's probably because Silver Fox is half the soul of one of the elder gods that wanted to murder him. So, I get it is what I'm saying. I get it. I like how Night Chill, sister of cold nights, it's like, and Keller's like, that moment where Keller's like, Night Chill? Really? Really? He says something like, you don't have more originality than that. That's the fake name. So awesome.
It's great. I also just love that Keller is there and like, having in my head like, oh, he's gonna be that sick guy, even though yes, we've met him before. I got it wrong. Okay. He's gonna be that sick guy and he's like so decrepit from being mortal. It's like, no, he's there. He's quick in the head. Like his mind is so sharp, but he just looks old, the oldest looking person you've ever met. And he's just like he's like vile of tongue, but like just this old guy. Yeah.
And it also shows, how much of a threat the Penny Endowment is to everybody, because all these forces are coming together and like, hey, I know we fought each other for 15 years. Sorry, but let's, like way bigger problems now. And all that stuff with Dujek and and Caladan Brood meeting for the first time. And they're like, bro, remember how for 15 years we've been like, our armies have been, but seriously, like you.
Respect,
you're the coolest.
Bro.
Yeah,
Matt, like remember when? Oh my God, so many people died that day. Great play, bro.
No, you. But I all of that. It's so cool just to be hanging out with that and have all these awesome guys hanging out with each other, and meanwhile, Silver Fox just keeps like injecting these little quips of like, hey, I'm blowing up your spot. Hey, your secret that you've never wanted anybody to know. Boop, there it is. Just a juicy, delicious scene.
Yeah.
That and it bounces around a couple of times between different point of views. We even get the point of view of Crone, the Great Raven, which is super interesting. And Crone's like, oh, she's totally going to tell my secret. I can't. Nobody can know my secret. And like right after that, Corlat's like, oh yeah, the bird thinks that no one knows the secret, but like
we all know the secret.
all the Tistiandi know it. It's like that bird's like, I'm gonna have to kill that 10-year-old girl so that I keep my secret. Meanwhile, everybody knows the secret.
I'm so glad Crone is back. I love that beautiful bird, but such a cool and nasty origin. They're born in the flesh of the crippled god, like spawning out of him like maggots.
Yeah.
Delicious.
Yeah. And there is, something to that. Like they keep talking about how the crippled god had magic, because it's literally described as an alien creature from another place.
Yeah.
So it comes to this place with magic that has never been seen before. And so Crone and the other Great Crows have the ability to touch into that in some way, which is pretty rad. And I love also that Corlat basically reveals that Animander Rake knows all of that and just is keeping Crone close to keep your enemies closer type of situation, which I thought was so interesting, that he knows that this magic can mess their stuff up, Yeah. And so wants to be able to keep tabs on it and make sure the Great Crows are kind of allies rather than antagonists.
Yeah. And I think the scene where they're all chatting together, like, if I'm not mistaken, it's sort of laid out that there's like 3 people that in my brain are like potential big bads for the tale. And they all feel like a Venn diagram in certain ways. Like there's similarities to them, but they are 3 distinct characters as far as I'm aware. The crippled god, alien.
Yeah.
I forget his name already, but the guy who obliterated the land and made the warren, or they had to put him in the warren with the chains.
Oh,
it's another K name, isn't it?
A lot of K names.
A lot of K names.
Too many K names, in my opinion.
And it's like K-name, crippled god. So chained up boy in the warren. And then Calor.
Wait, I thought that. Wait, now I'm confused because I feel like the crippled god is chained up in a warren, and we've seen someone visit them. But you're talking about
that is the crippled god. But
yes.
Is that guy in that warren? That's not the same warren as like the guy at the beginning of the book who was like, "Cool curses. Here's your curses."
Yeah,
is that the same guy?
That's the crippled god.
Okay.
The crippled god is that chained. The chained god, I believe, is the crippled god.
Okay, so that
I could be wrong. People are going to correct us, but I think that's right.
He's the alien that came down and was like, I'm ruling you peasants. And they're like, stop ruling us. He's like, okay, then die or whatever. He's just to prove his power. That's all the same guy.
I think so. Well, the person, yeah. Yes, I believe so. Okay. I could be wrong. Yes, and the rest of your list is the Penny and Doman, right? Is the other
big bad.
Yes, but I don't know if that's a person or it's a collection of septarchs, right?
It's like the religious movement. It's like a crusade.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like they are definitely they are being set up as the threat, right? Meanwhile, Quick Ben is kind of discovering this other big threat to burn the goddess that is the world, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if those are connected or if those are distinct threats, but that does seem to be. There's a lot. There's a lot going on. But so one of the big revelations is that Silver Fox is this unique combination of all these forces and destined to rule, lead, galvanize the Tilanamos in what is called the Gathering, where all of the Tilanamos armies are going to come together under her rule. She doesn't know if they are going to answer that, right? And then all we know is the Logros army is the only one we know that Kalinved, who sat the first throne and took over the leadership of that army, he leveraged that army to sort of establish the empire, the Malazan Empire originally, right?
Yes.
So the Logros army is the only army we know is still hanging around, and everybody's like, well, but there's other Tilanamos, right? Where are they? And no one seems to know, and even Silver Fox isn't sure that they're all going to come to the Gathering, even though she's waiting for their RSVP. We're having a gathering. You're cordially invited. You
want fish or chicken?
Fish or chicken. What do you make of all of Silver Fox's role in all this? She seems very important. Everybody's scared of her because of what she knows. And Calor is straight up like, let's kill her. Dead. But of course he has a axe to grind because she's part of her soul is one of the 3 elder gods that messed him up.
Yeah.
So anyway, what do you make of all that? There's a lot there.
It was another one of those scenes where I'm like, yeah, Silver Fox, she's an abomination of nature. Cool. But like Calor's extreme reaction to her is one of those things that I'm like, oh, is he just a villain? Or is this like a moment where the things turn so much and like he has, obviously privileged information about like Night Chill and those experiences, but is it just out of self-preservation? Like,
right.
It's one of those moments where I'm like, there sure is a lot there. I'm like, I don't want to make anything of it yet. I just want to have it be, or like, I don't know what to make of it. So I'm just like,
Fair
interesting.
Enough.
What about, did you make something specific of it? Like the only piece I really got was like Silver Fox potential to be the sleeper evil that comes out in the future.
That's interesting. Yeah. I think I'm definitely, like you, where I'm immediately sympathetic to Silver Fox just because I love Tattersail, and she, so I'm immediately connected to that character and want to see her grow up and become something cool. And she sounds like she's this insanely cool thing. She is this unique combination of all these forces and has all this power. So I'm not inclined to think that she is going to be a threat, although everybody else is worried about that. So perhaps. And I do think it is very in line with these books where Calor could be the only one who sees the truth. That certainly could be something that happens, but we'll have to wait and see. But there's a lot of really interesting, juicy stuff here there's lots of lore, but there's also lots of the planning stage, I thought, sequence where they're kind of talking about how are they going to do everything? Who should we align with? How are we going to march into these cities? Which city should we take in which order? And Silver Fox is like, you guys, you've been planning this all along. You just didn't admit it. And you're just kind of presenting it in a way that is supposed to be like, hey, we're just thinking of this right now. Anybody want to do it? I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, you had a side thread. Okay, you had your own email chain that you BCC'd us out of, and now you're looping us back around like this is an organic moment. It's not.
It's not. Blowing up your spot. The other thing is we get a sort of a glimpse into just how vicious and vile the Pantheon Domain is, because we find out that there is this city where the leader of the city is like, okay, all these Pantheon Domain folks are coming. They're going to murder all the citizens. I can save the citizens, make some money for myself, save myself, win, win, win. All I got to do is give them my high priests, gives them or they're not high priests, but they're all their priests. And the Pantheon Domain's like, thank you. We will eat them.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that.
So that's a little disturbing. The idea that there's this cannibal cult, immediately like ups the stakes a bit.
I mean, I feel like instantly when I hear like register, there's like this group that is like going on a religious crusade. I don't think like, oh, they're probably pretty tame.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, definitely the old cannibal crusade makes it a little gnarlier.
But it sounds cool that the plan is that they're gonna march through, liberate this series of cities, ultimately getting to a city of Coral. And meanwhile, Moonspawn is gonna be like ding, 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 creeping its way, stealth style, into the sky, and then using the sorceries to like, you didn't notice anything. We're gone. Just to kind of get reconnaissance to see how crazy the Pantheon Domain's sorceries are, because we don't know how potent and worrisome their command of sorcery is.
Yeah, they're using Moonspawn kind of as like, look over there, aren't they? So they're like having it come up, and then they're gonna basically try and blink it out of existence or like make it invisible. And they're like, you can do that? And they're like, we got a lot of powers you don't know about, but we don't want to talk about it. But yeah, we can do it. Which
so
I just
all
think
sounds
is so
really
funny.
cool.
Very cool. And also just the idea that you would like see Moonspawn coming. I don't know how fast Moonspawn can move, but I imagine you're like, oh man, we got to prepare. And you feel like, I get this idea that they would be like regrouping their forces so that they could be prepared for whatever big battle would come with Moonspawn. And then they're just like, bye. Just don't worry about the other domains that you're trying to capture because we got them. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it sets up, I think, a lot of really exciting stuff to look forward to in this novel, because I feel like that's going to be the main sort of military campaign, is stepping forward and moving through those cities to get to Coral, which sounds really exciting, and leading to a big, I would assume, big confrontation at some point. We also get a lot of really interesting stuff about the Sistiendi. I mean, we've heard about this before, that their whole deal is how just over everything they are, just can't. I just can't is the Sistiendi way, and to the point where they're fighting on behalf of people they don't care about. They don't care about themselves. They're just, you walk by them and they're like, I can't even make eye contact. And they when they die, their friends are just like, all right, you're dead. And it's the Rivi people who think they're important and literally come and scoop up their bodies and bury them and put them, in this specific area. And it's like, it's such an interesting notion that there's these people that have been around for so long that they just can't. It just
everything is mid.
Yeah, everything is mid to the Tistiandi, there's tons of lore drops here, and I feel like it really galvanized to me my image, my understanding of how a lot of these relationships work, and all of it had to sort of be built organically through the first two novels, specifically the first novel. I think we're getting a lot of that stuff continued here, but I think it's finally kind of coming into focus for me in a really distinct way, and I that's part of what was so satisfying about this scene, is that everybody is talking from a place of knowledge that I have, but I thought it was such a satisfying series of interactions, and you have Whiskey Jack there, like not trusting Silver Fox, but also kind of giving some flirts to Corlat, and there's all these cool folks that are, and Maybe's interpretation of all of it in the background, and Corlat's interpretation of all of it. It's just very satisfying to me.
One of the things that I thought was very interesting coming out of it, and maybe this sort of spins us into the next section, because it sort of ties in very broadly there, is everyone reacting to Silver Fox and being like, oh man, that's Tattersail. And instantly, so many of them were like, Ganuz is going to be messed up by this.
Yeah.
Like, this is going to really affect him deeply.
Yeah.
And something I thought was so interesting about that is from the first book, Ganuz and Tattersail hang out together. And Tattersail's like, oh, should I bang that guy? Nah, yeah, let's do it. But like, that
I know,
it
didn't feel like a grand love affair, It didn't feel like a romance.
But then several times they're like, that's Ganuz's love. That's his love.
Yeah.
And I think that's very telling of sort of my experience of the first book versus these second two books so far, is there are things that happen so quickly and so fleetingly in the first book that I wish we had a bit of a juicier bite.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I know when Tattersail died and when we saw Ganuz like reacting to her as the Rivi, when we briefly met her and we assumed it was her, or like, he was like, that must have been, he seemed very affected by it, but it all felt like light touch, like we were skipping across the surface of it because it wasn't the focal point of it. But hearing that relationship is so much deeper, it just was interesting to be like, oh, I guess they were like in love.
I agree with you. I think if the seed of a sort of more profound connection between the two of them had been laid in the first novel, I think it would enrich this moment. Even though I was really affected by it, it felt like
friends with Benz.
Yeah, and maybe that's just a quality of Tattersail, because even she, we see her other lover murdered early on in Gardens of the Moon. And she's really affected by it. But even that relationship before he is murdered felt friends with Ben's to her, maybe that's just sort of a nature of Tattersail's kind of aloof wizardry, like she's kind of above these things. I don't know. But yeah. I do agree with you. Like, I kind of wished that I was more invested in their love affair, because what happens in chapter 4, and feeling Perrin's like internal conflict over all of it, and being like, oh man, I really dig this chick. She's 10. Like,
speaking of flirting with a 10-year-old.
Well, that's what I was saying. That's what I was referencing.
Oh, was it?
Yes. What do you think? I was just bringing up you being young?
I did think that.
I was referencing the book we're reading.
I was like, I don't even think people know that that's like a gag.
I would never call you 10. You hilarious. All right, chapter 4. We're back with Gruntle and the gang at the crossing. And again, this is an amazing sequence for me, because I immediately love Buke. Buke. I love this new character. You're not agreeing? I
I'm
feel like
like
you're not agreeing.
I'm picturing this spell. How do you spell Buke?
Buke, like Duke
Oh yeah,
or puke.
yeah.
Buke.
Yeah, you're right.
Gotta have that liquid U. I went to theater school. You gotta have the liquid U. You know, they say the Duke pukes, but the Duke pooks. It's Buke.
All right.
Anyway, so Gruntle and the caravan, and this dude Buke, who is a guard and has just this very tragic backstory that I thought was so beautifully revealed. You know, where he was drunk and a fire killed his family, and instead of, you know, falling back into more drinking and obliterating himself, he took the opposite path, quit drinking, decided he was going to do the honorable thing and like die honorably, you know, try to be of service and do something good, but ultimately die. And I was so taken by all of that. I just think it's poetic and beautiful. And we have this stuff where he's like, I think this character, Corball Broach, is this serial killer, which is like, oh, we have a serial killer in these novels too? This is awesome. From Darujistan, this serial killer that was never caught, that the Assassin's Guild was hired to take out and they couldn't. And Buke is like, my gut tells me Corball Broach is the serial killer, and I'm gonna murder him. And Gruntle's like, that dude's gonna totally kill you. There's no universe where you best the sorceress serial killer. And then we also have all this fun stuff with the other characters, you know, talking, you know, being like, well, I actually would advise him not to do that either. And Gretel's like, I already advised him. Don't even step. He's my friend. I just love that. I loved that whole sequence. It's just amazing.
I also love that we have, like, you know, there's like a couple groups. One of the things I really like about these novels so far is we kind of like, okay, we're in Serious Town. And now we're like, oh, we're with Levity Crew.
Yeah.
There's like the distinct characters that bring you up a little after like the heavy stuff.
Yeah. Stani is the name of the other character.
Stani.
The woman who's like constantly, you know, jabbing the guys and verbal sparring with everybody. It's just so fun. They're, you know, joking with each other and her, you know, talking about like, well, yeah, I'm not attracted to you at all and all that stuff. Very fun. But I'm immediately, Buke is one of my favorite characters. Like, just, I want this dude to succeed, and I'm so invested in his story just from that beautiful illustration of his backstory. Then we, scene 2, we're into Quick Ben checking in with this ancient witch, the oldest living witch in New York, who he's like, hey, can I ask you about Burn? And she's like, not yet. Other questions first. Yeah. And we get some filling in of what the notion of the world is here and how Burn fits into it. Burn being, you know, sort of, Quick Ben compares it to a ball of dung that a beetle is forming.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
The ball of dung of like the children that live inside, which is like, I mean, that I guess exactly what we looked at is like the world's a ball and there's people inside being like, help us.
Yes. Yeah. And the witch basically says, like, which is, you know, very much something that we talk about with, you know, climate change and the earth is like, the planet don't care. Everybody dies. There's be new people later. It's, you know, it's bad for all the people that die. Yeah. We all wipe ourselves out. Planet don't care. Planet's still here. New people at some point. And that's the witch's perspective. And Quick Ben's like, yes, but I'm the people and I don't want to be wiped out. So I thought, and then the profound thing, the most profound line here is that why does Burn sleep? Yeah. To dream, which will be my second Hamlet reference of the episode, because it immediately conjured to me, you know, to sleep perchance to dream, the, you know, famous to be or not to be speech from Hamlet, which is, I would venture to say, not unintentional, a reference. But what did you make of this notion of Byrne dreaming and then those dreams becoming nightmares?
The first thing that sort of came to mind was the fact that we had those moments in the first book that took place in some kind of dream world where the dream space clearly has power. You can meet up there with your god buds and impregnate women on the earth, I guess, Zeus style. And so being in those spaces and knowing that dream space has power, Byrne being obviously this massive in size, if like we don't know like the scope of Byrne's power, but my brain sort of went to that all those dream spaces maybe even are like a warren of her own, so that people are going into, and that's the dream warren that has power. And if that shifts into nightmare zone, it's literally fuel for a potentially devastating amount of power. That was sort of the only like real connection that I made about that. I don't know if we've seen like particular like nightmare-y other things. But basically anytime somebody's like, there's a big amount of power that seems like it could be bad, I'm like, it's probably another warren.
Well, clearly it would be bad if the planet-sized goddess starts having nightmares and Quippen's like, I gotta fix this fever, her sickness. I gotta fix it somehow. I don't know how, but I gotta fix it. Couple of other interesting takeaways. The witch calls Quickben the snake of the desert, the many-headed snake, and 12 souls, which all feel very significant to me. We don't know yet why. And then the other thing is, on the way out, the witch says, shut the door because I prefer the cold. And Quickben's like, why did she say I prefer the cold? So I think that's going to be a significant little clue to something. I prefer the cold. I don't know. Memories of Ice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jacket, ice, magic. Amtos Falak Warren. Or whatever.
Yeah, Amtos Falak is the Warren of Chili Chills, of Coldy Colds. So scene 3, we are hanging out with Perrin. We're in Perrin's POV. They're moving through. They're heading over to meet up with Caladan Brood's camp. And this is when we find out a little bit more about the Talana Moss and also about Spindle, who's just wearing a shirt made of his mom's hair. Like,
oh, disgusting.
If wearing a shirt of my mom's hair is wrong, I don't want to be right. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'll never wash it because my mom didn't wash her hair either. You know, like, sure. Do I need therapy? Maybe. But let's just stop talking about stop talking about the shirt that I made my mom's hair.
I feel like I've seen somebody wear a shirt that I'm like, I felt like I knew it. I felt like I could feel the texture of it. Yeah, it was such a gross description.
Incredible. Yeah. I mean, beautifully evocative. These all of these, what I assume are side characters who are so distinct and have this incredibly memorable, iconic feature about them. Like, you immediately know about this. And the fact that he's using somebody else's Warren. And it's this weird, like, make everybody uncomfortable Warren. He's been freaking the animals out. All the animals, like the cat runs its head into the wall. All the animals are freaking out. His Warren is just like, is the ew Warren. It's the Warren of ew.
Icky.
I don't like it.
Well, I also just like, they're like, okay, you can expand your Warren so people will feel the vibes of the Warren and be like, oh, there's sorcery over there. That's going to be powerful. I want to steer clear, was like the vibe I got.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, but my Warren's like messed up though. Like, well, Quickben will open 50 Warren or 10 Warrens at the same time, so we can't use his. So do it to it. And then suddenly all the animals are freaking out, and it's like, maybe you do keep that closed next time.
It's just awesome. Like, we got to move through the city, and we don't want anybody around us. I can open my icky warren and people like literally even the animals will freak out. Good. Let's do that. Do it. And Perrin shows up. Whiskey Jack is like, good news, bad news. Good news. Love of your life is back. Bad news. She 10.
Well, they like meet up and they're like, over here. It's casual, man. And then it's so interesting to see like everything that Perrin is sort of fighting with, right? So he's fighting with like this is the chapter where I forget who it is. They're like, we need to get Quick Ben over here, like stat.
Everybody always says that. I feel like Quick Ben is our Gandalf. It's like, we really should have him around all the time.
We need him to like yoink something away from Perrin and then run away as quickly as possible. Can we have that happen?
Yeah.
But I think it's Mallet, like the medic, was like, man, I went near him and my Warren was like, no.
Yeah, that was the previous. Yeah.
Like just repulsed by him. He's dealing with something. He is sick.
Yeah.
And not just because he loves that 10-year-old child over there. He is sick. And so he's like dealing with so much. And then on top of, him having this hound blood sort of chaos happening within him.
Yeah.
Like his emotional, I'm just not going to see her. That's just not going to happen.
Right. And Wishy's just like, no, I didn't go through all this for you not to see her.
She gave you a cute pet name already.
Yes. So, okay, let's dig into all that because firstly, like before we even get to that, I want to talk a little bit about, this is the first time that Perrin has kind of thought about his family he went and visited his family briefly in Gardens of the Moon, but he's literally like, okay, Tavor, man, that girl, she does what it takes to get out on top. I get it. She's ruthless. And she clearly, she became adjunct, and it really contextualizes all the stuff from Deadhouse Gates in the sense that, and we knew all of it, I just didn't put the equation together where it's Lysine and the new rulers, said, we got to purge the nobles. House Perrin, nobles, right?
Yeah.
Tavor is like, that's bad for me as a noble. I'm going to instead align hard with Lysine and the new management. And to prove it, the only way to prove it is to show how ruthless I am to the other nobles. Like, I ain't with them anymore. I'm with you, girl. So I'm going to prove it by being extra special ruthless to the nobles and just slaughter them in the streets, march them through the streets and slaughter them, including my own sister, because that's how much I'm with you and not with the old folks anymore. But secretly, I'm going to take care of my sister by having one of the old, not claws, but thorns?
Talons.
One of the old talons, make sure she's protected. So playing both sides. But I love how, so that came into focus. But I love how Perrin is like, yeah, no, that tracks for my sister. She was always the one who was the most cunning, conniving, looking out for number one. And then, but also he's like, I hope Felison's okay.
Yeah, interesting to hear him have that tender moment for Felison, because it also, adds so much more to Felison feeling betrayed if she does have like this closeness with one of her siblings. So being like, I can't believe you went and rebelled against like the Empress and knew that it would cause, like, you must have known that it would basically cause me to possibly get murdered as a result. So feeling so betrayed by her brother, where, because we never see them interact, and she comes out of the second book and we don't hear Gnu's talk about his family really at all in the first book, having her be like so sad that being like, my brother, like, nobody's coming for me. It
Right.
just like adds to that like sadness that she would feel. Like I'm super tight with my brothers. If they did something that would cause me to likely get slaughtered in the street, I'd be pretty bummed if I thought
Yeah.
that there was like a direct and deliberate sort of piece to that. So I liked his like sort of, oh, I really want the best for Felison, but Tavore seems like she could figure it out. Is like interesting to see from that sort of third party perspective.
The other thing that struck me, and I hesitate to make this comparison because I wonder how irksome it might be to Mr. Erikson to be constantly compared to George R. R. Martin, but it reminds me of the very beginning of the first novel of Song of Ice and Fire. After the prologue, the first scene of A Game of Thrones, the novel, is Eddard Stark and his group finding these 5 or whatever number of them wolves, right? And each of them being given to one of his kids. And the framing of that entire novel and even the entire series going forward is like, here's this house, here's these kids, let's see what happens to each of them. Some of them die, some of them do other things, but like each of the kids from this first house that we're introduced to has a wildly different adventure. Arya goes off and becomes an assassin, and all the different avenues that these kids take. I bring that up because I feel like that could have been the framing that Erikson took with House Perrin. He could have said, there's these kids in this noble house, and their world is turned upside down. One of them decided he wants to go off and be a soldier, and the other 2 are just noble women, but there's this crisis and they have to figure out how to survive. He could have framed it as, here's these 3 siblings. Let's see what happens to each of them. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't. It's so much more interesting, I think, not more interesting, but interesting in its own way. Like it is such an interesting decision, such an interesting take to have their connection pre-exist, but be introduced to them almost as bespoke characters that their connection to each other comes more into focus later, right? Mm-hmm. I just think it's such an interesting way to do it because, as with these novels across the board, it subverts expectations, right? Because you don't have that point of connection between the 3 of them. We don't even know. We have that one moment in Gardens of the Moon where he comes home and visits them, but there's very little interaction there. Mm-hmm. And instead, we have, the third book is the first time that we really view them as a trio of siblings. I just think that's so interesting.
I think so as well. Like even at the beginning of Dead House Gates, when Felison's like, it's Felison Perrin, it's like, oh, that's Gnu's sister.
Yeah.
That's almost like the last time I thought about that. And Felison and Tavore, they're very connected because of the Felison's like spite towards Tavore and hearing about her being Lassine's new adjunct. Like that's having like the third pillar in this like really come into focus. I fully agree with you. It's very interesting.
It's a cool approach. Like it's just so unconventional, as these books are across the board, and I find it to be very compelling because, as you've talked about so often about trusting the reader, like making these connections much later and having it all really come into focus. I mean, I'm using focus way too often this week, but but I really feel like these chapters have a lot of that. Of like, oh right, yes, yes, it's falling into place. Okay, that's not even what we wanted to start talking about. What we wanted to start talking about is like. Perrin's like, I'm sick because I touched yucky blood. Hound blood. And Whiskey Jack is like, that's not enough for you to be sick. It's got to be something else. Mm-hmm. And he's like, well, I mean, I also went into that sword warren and saved all those, like literally broke all those hounds out of an unleavable warren.
And then I also left the warren too.
Yes. And Silver Fox basically says, your Genisond rule It's like, what? What girl?
Yes.
What girl? Genasan rule. You are the wanderer within the sword. You are special. Don't tell Animander that you broke out of his sword, Warren. He will not
She's
like that.
Look, as somebody who also doesn't know how to keep their mouth shut, you really should keep your mouth shut about that.
Yeah. Yes.
Yo,
I don't know if
people
you
want to kill me, but like Animander will want to kill you, my guy.
I kept saying stuff, and then that really ancient wrinkled guy pushed me up against the wall, and other people had to threaten him so that I wouldn't murder me. So, like, don't do that. I mean, I feel like this really makes Perrin like full on fantasy story. I mean, this is the version of you're the chosen one, right? You did a thing.
Yes.
You did a thing. He doesn't want it. But again, a very traditional fantasy trope done in a very untraditional way. And I think it's just so juicy and satisfying to read it like this.
I agree. And it makes me want to go back, and I know I'm not going to. I feel like every week I'm like, oh, I can't wait to go back and like read certain chunks in particular.
Yeah.
But I really want to go back and read his experience in the Warren again, because he was just kind of like, this is freaky.
Right.
That's a big cart. And it looks like there's like a hole under there.
Yeah.
But we also learn like very specifically about like what that hole is, what the cart is,
yes.
like what the point of this Warren is. And
so there's lots of stuff about the deck of dragons, and how these houses, and Zath House is also a house, and there's so much juicy, interesting stuff here. That houses are these permanent things that stay in one place, but they didn't used to be. They used to move around, and that's what a cart is. And so in this Sword Warren, there's the Dragonpour Warren, there's this cart, and that is literally what these houses used to be. Fascinating. What's your takeaway?
The fact that you just said all the stuff with the Deck of Dragons, I'm like, we didn't even talk about the table.
Oh, I know. That's such a fun scene.
Oh, so cute. Or like, and like a cute bonding moment between Dujek and Caladan, being like, that was my table. We used to like play, we used to gamble on this with the Deck of Dragons.
Yeah. He recognizes it because of how poorly it's made.
Yeah,
it's so good. Yeah.
And I was like, well, I like the table. And he's like, cool. And then like the next scene is all like the mischievous, like the soldier pals being like trying to heave it out of there so they can go do their like gambling thing again. Then like there's a new Deck of Dragons card.
Yeah, it's so they're like, we're totally gonna do this same scam that Fiddler used to do, where we'd rip everybody off and steal all their money because we know how this is a rigged game. And they're like, and then they lose all their money. Like, what? Look under the table.
It's a formula. There's got to be there's something else. It's not my fault.
Look under the table. Is there something under? It's like, there's not anything. What? There's
definitely something here.
Somebody painted a mural under here.
But like did somebody paint a mural under there? Did it like appear because they were using the deck? Like,
yeah, I think that's what we're led to believe, is that it spun these. If a new house comes into being, it spontaneously populates. I think you mentioned this on a previous episode.
I did, yes.
Yeah, it spontaneously populates in the deck. So you're like, oh, I got new cards. It's the best possible Magic the Gathering, where it's like, you didn't have to buy any booster packs. They just appear.
You're just playing while you're playing. But the fact that it didn't appear in the deck, or is this how things spontaneously appeared before as like a symbol to somebody, and somebody needs to then document that, and then everybody else gets it? Or does anybody who's playing with the Deck of Dragons, it's like, oh, the symbol is over here. Like how that actually comes into the deck, I am still so interested in, like what that means. And anyway, it looks like we got a new card, new house.
And it looks like, so our understanding of how Shadow Throne and Cotillion inherited the House of Shadow is that they didn't set out to get that one. They like went through the House of Death, right? The Dead House. But
That's
Hood
awesome.
already, it's like, I got this one, bro. This is one. But all the houses are linked.
Mhm.
So they were like, well, is there a vacancy I'm looking on Zillow. Is there any, and the Azath house, like, well, you can have this one because House of Shadow is currently unoccupied. So there's squatters in the House of Shadow, which made them, as
Gods?
ascendants. Yeah.
Yeah.
But now Perrin is a new unaligned house. Like, he represents a new force in the universe.
Yes. And so as far as I can tell, see, this is, if I read the book even like 2 days before we do the podcast, it's like I struggle to like pull it back together. He's a new unaligned house, but like literally a new house, not like, oh, he walked in and opened the door and took a house. It like
they
is
forged
a
new
one.
Yeah. And that sounds amazing and awesome. And again, it's something that I guess that was Gardens of the Moon when he escaped the thing.
Yes.
It was another thing where it felt like, oh, it's just a thing that it didn't feel like it was significant. I mean, it felt significant that he escaped the unescapable Sword Warren, but the way he didn't feel triumphant, or, it felt like a quirk of fate or a lucky thing. And yet it is massive repercussions,
Yeah, I agree. Like, I remember reading that and I was like, oh, it's more interesting that he released the dogs. And then what I thought it was going was that now, because he helped these dogs and those are Shadow Throne's puppies, that now he was going to be like a Shadow Throne buddy.
Right.
And so the implication is so much bigger than what's up?
Yeah.
Cotillion. What's up?
Yeah. I mean, so we end the chapter with literally the words, "I will fail you all," from Perrin. He's does not have any confidence in himself, doesn't think he should be the one. Silver Fox is like, you have lots of responsibilities now. And he's like, I can't, this is not good. She, of course, has big responsibility. She's going to, has to galvanize the Tilana Moss. We have so many cool setups in these 2 chapters of what, we have Quickban worrying about Burn. We have the armies headed toward Coral and ready to start attacking the Panion Domain. We have all these other forces. We have Perrin and Silver Fox as these 2 uber powerful, uber important, new, unprecedented beings that also love each other. So that's cool. I mean, what are you most excited about going forward? I feel like there's so much setup here, which is this. I'm already like so in love with this novel. I'm so in love with where like, every page. I'm like, this is incredible. I feel like it's fine. The series has kicked into even another gear for me.
I think that what I'm most looking forward to going forward, I mean, is the same thing that I feel like at sort of this point in both the previous books so far, is seeing like that turn of the moment where we see all the paths sort of starting to like point in the same direction. And right now there are a bunch of paths, but they all kind of feel like parallel lines. And I'm like, I don't quite know how these are all connected.
Yeah.
And I'm always excited to see the turn where you see like the little bend in one of them, being like, oh, okay, we can start putting these together. I do think the Deck of Dragons stuff and like how those houses work and how the power exists in this world. I'm delighted and fascinated with all the Warren magic and how it's connected, especially because it seems to be, I mean, as in any book of the book so far, such an important part of it. But like with the prologue starting with them throwing like, eating those children into the endless pain Warren.
Yeah.
I am excited to see how all this magic shakes out and just deepening my understanding of how this universe really works.
Right. The structures of everything. Yeah.
Yes. So that's what I'm most looking forward to.
I want more Spindle. Give me more Spindle.
Priorities. Can I have more clothing made of pieces of dead relatives?
People.
Where's
This
my
clothing
skin
is
suit?
people.
Yeah, you want skin suits? Get that panty endowment out here.
Yeah.
I'm sure we're gonna see some freaky stuff, boy.
It's going to get freaky when we meet them. I have no doubt about that. That and Buke. Buke is my boy. I'm going to say it right now. I ride or die with Buke. I feel like he is. I want more Buke. I want to see what he does. I want him to take down a serial killer.
Devil's advocate. What if Buke is the serial killer and he's just blaming it on anyone else so that people don't look at him?
I'll be so disappointed. I'll be so disappointed.
Subvert those expectations.
Yeah.
Hey.
I love how Stoney, by the way, Stoney was like, Buke is okay to, he's nice to look at, but the personality is a little bit of a bummer. And she's like, it's the opposite of you. And he's like, you love my personality. It's awesome. So great. All right. Well, we got a lot. I mean, we're at an hour 20 and thank goodness we didn't try to do 3 chapters.
I know.
Thank you again, Sorov, and thank you all for your comments, your advice in how to navigate these novels. It's always useful and helpful and fun. Thank you all for continuing to comment. We do have favorite sentences of these sections. I think this is the most that I have noted down as potential favorite sentences since we started doing this. I feel I have more contenders this week than I ever have before, but I'm curious what you picked.
But actually, I only picked 2 from this chapter.
All right.
And they're both related. They're like almost on the same page, but the description of the maybe and getting introduced to the character of the maybe, I really, really loved.
Okay.
And so the first one that I captured about her that I really loved is the maybe's dark eyes glittered within their nests of wrinkles as she watched the child scampering over the weathered terraces. A mother's instincts ever abided. It was not right to curse them, to lash out the bindings of love that came in the division of flesh. For all the flaws raging within her, for all the twisted demands woven into her daughter, the maybe could not, would not spin webs of hate.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I could not, would not. On a train, I could not, would not. With a plane. Been reading that to my daughter a lot lately. Okay. Here's one, again, also dealing with the maybe. This is a discussion between the maybe and Silver Fox. It's a little long, but I think it's beautiful. You are wise, mother, despite your own lack of faith in yourself. The hidden is slowly revealed. Look on these once enemies. You fight in your mind, raising up all the differences between us. You struggle to hold on to your dislike, your hatred of them, for that is what is familiar. Memories are the foundations of such hatred. But mother, memories hold another truth, a secret one, and that is all that we have experienced. Yes?
Whew.
So good, right?
That's one wise baby.
Yeah. Experience, and it skips a little bit, but then she kind of goes on. I think this is also experiences. They are what we share from opposite sides, perhaps, but they are the same. The same. It's just so profound. It's like you're trying to hold on to this hatred because that's all you know, and look at how similar you are to your enemy. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you have another one?
You go ahead.
Okay. All right. I have, let me find it. I like this line. This is just one sentence. It's beautiful. Self-pity could easily become a well-worn path in his thoughts unless he remained mindful of its insipid allure.
That is a good one.
I feel like that applies to my life. Like you could just sit around feeling sorry for yourself unless you realize it's a dumb thing to think.
Mm-hmm. Or just like how sapping that can be. It's
Yeah. And I'll do one more.
yes, yes.
This is amazing. Death and dying makes us into children once again, in truth. One last time, there in our final wailing cries. More than one philosopher has claimed that we ever remain children, far beneath the indurated layers that make up the armor of our adulthood. Armor encumbers, restricts the body and soul within it, but it also protects. Blows are blunted, feelings lose their edge, leaving us to suffer naught but a plague of bruises, and after a time, bruises fade.
Good sentences.
Jesus. How is he so good? How? Incredible stuff. What a joy to read these, and what a joy to have you alongside us. Thank you so much for your comments and support. We're going to leave you with a recommendation of another book to put in your to-read pile. Lana, do you have a suggestion of a novel to read?
I do. I'm going to suggest This Perfect Day by Ira Levin, which is a sort of sci-fi dystopia novel, very, very much in the style of Brave New World. I think actually when it was released in the 90s, it got criticism for being too similar to Brave New World. But if you have read Brave New World and you sort of like that experience and want something similar again that is incredibly well written, Ira Levin also wrote Rosemary's Baby. I really enjoyed it. So it's called This Perfect Day. It's not a super long read. I don't know, maybe 200 pages, and check it out.
Very cool. I have a little bit of a surprise because my recommendation this week is a book you recommended to me that I finally finished. I decided to listen to it on audio. It's The Three Body Problem.
Oh, yes.
I finished the first book. I am on to the second, which is called The Dark Forest, I believe. And I listened to this on audio. So that's what I was doing. I was reading the Malazan books and then listening to an audiobook in tandem. And I got to say, I hate to throw anybody under the bus. I don't think the audio narrator is my favorite. The voices he does were a little grating on me. It's got to be very challenging for an English-speaking narrator, perhaps, to do a lot of the Chinese stuff correctly. So at least it would be for me. And he does that very well, but not my favorite audiobook experience. But I do think it actually is a good audiobook. My qualms with the narrator aside, I think it actually is a pretty decent audiobook choice in that this couldn't be farther away from the Malazan books stylistically, where, as we just demonstrated with those amazing sentences, like how poetic and beautiful the prose is. Granted, this book is published in English in translation, so,
yes.
Keep that in mind. But I would never say the prose here is poetry. It's very clinical. It's like, it feels like a lecture. It is very much the opposite of show not tell, right? It is telling you very there's actually even directly, yes. And there are entire chapters that are just like, we found a document in the government, here it is. It's like not even attempting to make it into a narrative, so to speak. But that doesn't take away from how cool this book is. And you were super right. And I kind of would love to go into a deep dive on it with you at some point. Maybe after I finish the other two in the trilogy.
Oh,
but
my God.
I hear the second book is even crazier. But the pure ideas expressed, and I think clumsily at first, in my opinion, I was not on board with this novel at first. I just felt
like the ant walking forever. Sorry.
I didn't like the video game stuff, frankly. I felt the video game stuff was super tedious, but I understand it. Later you realize it is a It is a conceit.
Spoilies.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to say what it means, but it's a conceit to express something that would have been difficult to express any other way. You're just sort of stepped through it and led to a realization that the only other way to do it is literally to do a lecture. And this book really is an expression of ideas more than it is a story. And in my opinion, do you agree with that?
I agree. I think the next two get more story-like.
Interesting. And another thing that's fascinating is I jumped into this on your recommendation, knowing only it's a sci-fi novel and it is called The Three Body Problem. I assumed that meant we're going to be in cloning. There's going to be cloning. 3 bodies. That's, I didn't know what it was about. And I think it's fascinating that you could read like 80% of I read 80% of this novel still not knowing what it was about. It doesn't reveal itself in a direct way until very, very late. So what's that?
Oh, well, a 3-body problem is like a known physics.
Not to me. I'm an idiot. You forget how much of an idiot I am. So I had no idea what that was. And when you do find out what that is, or at least when I found out what it is, everybody else might already know. But when I found out what it was, I was blown away. And so the revelation of what this series is really about was so cool to me, although it happens very, very late. And the way the book ends, like the last chunk of this book, the last, quarter of this book is killer. It takes a long time to ramp up to it, but it is killer. And I cannot wait to read the second novel. I just think it is the ideas, the way it expresses the ideas, the way it feels like hard science fiction in that, it's really based on observable science that we have now, but just kind of taken into a realm of fiction. I just was blown away by the ending of it.
Yeah, I think it is incredibly. I could definitely do like a deep dive on these books with you. It's definitely like hard sci-fi, even to like the sort of I can't think of the right word right now. The word coming to my brain is like personnel drama, like the way, like the nature of how things react.
Yes,
as I think it's. I'm going to get this name wrong. Michio physicist
Michio Kaku,
Michio Kaku has talked about this. I don't know if Cixin Liu was inspired by him, but there's interviews of him explaining what it would be like. I don't want to spoil anything about it, but what certain things would be like, and he describes it as it happens in these books. It's very fascinating, and I agree with you. It is a slow ramp.
Yeah.
But through the end of this novel and the next two, the whole sort of premise is that time races faster and faster. And so too does the sort of like the way the story pulls you and engages you and becomes more story-like, goes faster and faster and faster. And these books are the tales of, I don't even want to say anything else. I'm so excited that
I'm super excited to dive into the second novel, and I'll bring up how I feel about that when I complete it. But I really appreciated the recommendation, and I thought it was a really cool book to read or to listen to on audio, because it does feel like a lecture, and there's a lot of really, really cool ideas in it. It actually there's a movie that was released several years ago called I can't remember, something. It's a Godzilla movie, but it was like a take on Godzilla. Like, what if we just dealt with Godzilla from the perspective of how it would work politically? I can't, Kaiju Godzilla. I can't remember what the name of the Godzilla movie is. I will have pulled it up on the screen already. But it reminded me of that, where it's more like you're looking at systems rather than individual characters per se. It's more like, how does the system react to these things happening, rather than any individual character on the ground. But I thought that was cool. It's a very interesting novel, and one I highly recommend. And I'm very curious to see how the Netflix series is going to handle it. I know there's already a Chinese language series that's been made. I have not watched any of,
but like knowing the end of the book, can you now be like, how could they possibly?
Oh, I know. There's it has one of the coolest endings I've read. It's just like the revelation and going from complete despair to hope, like it's pretty rad. It's pretty rad. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Book Club. Thanks for being with us. Again, 2 more chapters next week. So I know I lied to you last week and I said 3. So you're ahead of us if you're paying attention to me, which you probably never should. But 2 chapters next week. So that'll be chapters 5 and 6. And we'll see you then. In the meantime, it's time to dance it out.
When the world's too dark of a place to be, and you need an escape from reality, open up those pages, it's sci-fi or fantasy, whatever genre you please. And join a book club, 'cause you won't read it on your own. Join a book club, so you'll be held accountable. It's just a means to an end, but you're doing it with your friends, so join the Book Club by